this book would be a new contract with Random House. But, I had to have an idea first. And fortunately, by that time, I had evolved to this point in my career where I don't have to write the whole book. I can sell on an idea, which I did. But I had to come up with the idea. And I wanted to move a little bit more current in the historical time period. So I was really kind of stuck in the 1920s. I thought, well, that's an interesting era. That a lot of things going on in the 1920s. Surely I can find something interesting to write about. And then I thought of aviation, and really, when you think of the 1920s, I mean, the aviation was such a huge romantic part of the 1920s, right? It was after World War I and flying aces, and all of a sudden you had barnstormers, and it was very romantic. And of course, when you think about aviation in the 1920s, the number one name that I was like, well, Lindbergh, of course, Lindbergh, because I thought maybe of fictionalizing some, but based on some real female barnstorming pilots or wing walkers, that kind of thing. But then I thought, whoa, Lindbergh, that's a big name. And I went back and I had the wonderful Scott Berg biography that won the National Book Award, I believe it was, of Charles Lindbergh, that I had read at some point years ago, and I reread it. But this time as I was rereading, I was looking at Anne. And that's when I did realize, well, yeah, we all know about Anne Morrow Lindbergh. And, certainly many, many women I found, love Gift from the Sea. It's a beloved book among women. But, we always see her as just kind of the tragic mother and the kidnapping and the author of Gift from the Sea. But I thought her aviation accomplishments were completely overlooked. And that was really what kind of made me want to write about her, to bring that to light. But then I just started thinking about that marriage. And that's when I did a little bit of my research and found out that Charles Lindbergh had this whole secret family stashed away in Europe that had come to light in 2002 or 3. It actually, made headlines in the United States, but for some reason, no one had yet written about the Lindberghs with this new information. And that's what I did. And so now I was able to write Anne's story through my eyes, based on research, imagining that she did find out about this family. Oh, truth be known, not even her children know if she did or not. So
amazing. With respect to the flying skills that she had, and I'll edit it in earlier before we talk about the Swans of Fifth Avenue, what were her aviation skills? They were impressive.
Yeah, they were. And she actually has her own, alongside Amelia Earhart. And I think Anne was a better pilot than Amelia Earhart. Anne has her own exhibit at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, or at least she did. I know they've remodeled the museum since I've been there. And forgive me if I don't remember them all, because it has been a while since I've written this book. But if I remember correctly, I mean, she was the first woman to earn her glider pilot's license in America. She's the first woman to do that. One of the first people to have a radio operator's license, period. She was her husband's co-pilot. So when you think of that, who did Lucky Lindy trust to fly the plane? Well, he took a few, Z's on those. They did these amazing around the globe charting flights, where they basically mapped out the flight paths that we use today. The Lindberghs did on their own back then, and she was his co-pilot. So they were vast, her skills, and she was very accomplished. And when you think of that little kind of nerdy little brainy girl from Smith College, born in a lap of luxury, deciding to get in a plane and learn to fly back in the 1929, 30, when flying, wasn't very safe. It's an amazing journey that but she tends to be very, in her own writing, very self-effacing, very much in the shadows, always putting forward someone else, whether it was her sister when they were young or Charles later on. She doesn't let herself ever step into the spotlight in her writing, in her memoirs. I wanted her to do that finally in that book. After Aviator's Wife, I started writing a book, and another book that was under contract, and my editor signed off. It was again going to be this kind of biographical historical fiction about a well-known woman. I'm not going to say her name, you will know her. wrote the book, but unlike my previous novels, my editor and I had a devil of a time. I couldn't get that book to work. She couldn't get that book to work. We spent months back and forth, revising and revising and revising. And in the middle of this, I got up again, pushed myself away from the desk, and I started looking at my own bookshelves because I started to think, well, this is not going to work. But before I tell her I can't make this work, I need to come up with something else. I can't just, this isn't going to work. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I couldn't do that. And I picked up the only book written by Truman Capote no, I had two. I had Other Voices, Other Rooms, and Answered Prayers. And I picked up this book, Answered Prayers, which is not a finished novel, if anybody knows at all. It's just kind of a unfinished novel. He always swore he had the ending to, but never showed anyone. But it's not his best work. I call it minor Capote. It's very biting and gossipy and not fun at all. But as I was reading this, I was remembering in the back of my mind, wasn't there kind of a scandal attached to this? Wasn't there? And I went and looked it up again. Google's my best friend. And that's when I kind of reacquainted myself with the enormous societal and literary scandal that happened when Truman Capote published this puff piece in Esquire magazine, basically sliming every one of his famous fashionista society ladies who loved him, his swans. And he just exposed all their dirty little secrets in very thinly veiled fashion, particularly the infidelities of his very dearest friend, Babe Paley, her husband, William S. Paley, who was the founder of CBS. And when he wrote this book, this piece, it wasn't a book, they all dropped him like a hot potato. And it really was the end of Truman Capote. He lived another, I don't know how many years after that, 10 years maybe, but not happily and not well, and not and really became addicted to everything under the sun and was just never really wrote again. And I thought, whoa, that's a juicy book right there, telling this whole story in a fictionalized form had not been done at all. Now, there'd been countless Vanity Fair articles written about it, some nonfiction, but not a novel. And I sat down and I wrote. It was like, that book was like a gift from the gods. It was like it just flowed out of me. And I sat down and I wrote like the first 20 pages, as pretty much they read today. And I sent it to my editor and I said, read this. And then you tell me. I can write the very best I can of that other book, get it to an acceptable level, and I'm sure we can publish it. Or I can write this. And she immediately responded. She said, screw the other book, write this. And I did.